17. John, I think you're with us again. And welcome, Noel.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, having just endorsed the first draft plan change to the unitary plan, quite a pivotal moment, really. We're now about to talk to you about another potential plan change to the unitary plan at a slightly earlier stage than Whanuapai, but still a very significant plan change. So I'll hand over to Noel and Brenda, who's our principal planner on this project.
And welcome, Brenda.
And
Yeah.
And we did feel this one really would benefit from a short 3 to 5 minute slide presentation. So if you bear with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This project has been going for several years. It's predominantly been in the setup phase of the project. It has got long-term plan funding, and its intention is to improve the information mapping and appropriate management of Māori and cultural heritage. The work program to date is set out in those 4 years. As I said, predominantly we've been in the setup phase. Then the unitary plan came along and it was put on the back burner somewhat, and now we're back into this being the focus. This year we're looking at implementation of the nominated sites, and we're looking for a future plan change shortly. These are the tasks that are being undertaken at the moment, and who is leading those tasks. Clearly the council and the heritage staff are doing the information gathering. The assessment of Mataranga Māori values has been done by mana whenua. The threat and risk assessment is also being done by mana whenua, and I'll come back to that issue a bit later. The appropriate planning or management approach to this is being led by council, and there will be site visits, landowner engagement, and we will be doing that jointly with council and mana whenua.
So if we just go back to one word there, my ignorance, mātauranga.
I had to ask that question myself.
Education.
It's education, knowledge.
Knowledge is a good thing. But too much of it can be a bad thing.
Sorry, I
Should have asked our member.
So this is where we are at currently. 13, all mana whenua are on board with this project, which is fantastic achievement in itself. They're supportive of the process, they're supportive of the methodology. 13 of those 19 have nominated 266 sites. For those 266 sites, we have completed the previous tasks that are well underway for the first 4 of those tasks for 103 of the sites. A key milestone coming up is that in April and June next month, we will be confirming with mana whenua which sites to proceed with. As I said, there are 266 nominated, but 103 are well advanced that we can be confident that there is sufficient work done to look at a plan change. We've still got another 100 plus to proceed with. Starting from July, we'll be going out and doing site visits. We'll come back to the planning committee in November to let you know the outcome of those site visits, with a report recommending a proposed plan change and potentially other management approaches. And we're looking at a plan change early next year, should the council agree. We thought it's important that the committee were aware of the difference between sites and places of significance and sites and places of value to mana whenua. Sites and places of significance, they are nominated by mana whenua. There will be landowner engagement. The site extent will be tailored to the context from what we find through the research and the site visit. This approach is supported by the Independent Hearings Panel. We currently have 75 in the Auckland Unitary Plan, and I think from memory 10 to 15 were put in by the Independent Hearings Panel. So that's a well-established, accepted process for scheduling. Sites and places of value to mana whenua. These were not nominated by mana whenua, notwithstanding that they did support the process. They were based on archaeological records. There was no landowner engagement. A site extent was the same for all the sites. It was just a uniform approach. It wasn't supported by the independent hearings panel in terms of there wasn't a sufficient evidential basis. They did support the concept, but not the sites, and hence it was removed from the Auckland Unitary Plan. So there is a difference between these two. So just to give you some idea of what we're looking at, the sites that we've advanced sufficiently to know where they are, 35 are in private ownership, 16 are in public ownership, 31 are in a mixture of both, so that could be an urapa predominantly on a reserve that also may infringe upon private residents. And we have a number of those at places like Omaha, for instance. However, the majority of those we haven't mapped the site extents yet, and we will be doing that on a site-by-site basis. So while this planning agenda item is around a potential plan change, there are a number of other regulatory approaches that could fall out of this piece of work. We could do nothing. We could rely on our current overlays. For instance, in any structure planning process, there is a process that has to be followed to identify values of significance to mana whenua, so we could rely on that. We could deal with this through reserve management plans or rely on resource consent triggers, or we could schedule. So all that is going to be subject to a Section 32 analysis through the plan change process. There are some non-regulatory approaches that may well be appropriate, and that will emerge through the discussions between mana whenua and landowners. So, for instance, they may reach agreement between themselves about what they do, and that could be formalised between those two parties. Just to let you know what the communication and engagement plan approach is at the moment, in April we are going to the local board chairs forum to let them know of this piece of work, plus all the other heritage pieces of work we're doing. We, if required, will go to the individual local boards. We're going back to the Rural Advisory Panel and the Heritage Advisory Panel to seek their advice, and particularly on the engagement process, I think will be important. I mean, if need be, we can go back to the local boards. In July, November, we will be going out to landowners and then bringing the results of all this back to the Planning Committee on the 28th of November, all going well. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Noel. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Noel, I'm concerned, there are no attachments to this report. I'm concerned about the 35 sites that are privately owned. I don't know where they are.
That's correct.
So my question is, where are they?
So we haven't
So,
mapped those totally with confidence to bring you back and say, here are these 35 sites.
so you're asking us to approve a process?
So we will be bringing that back to you before before you adopt a plan change. So we will have gone out and consulted with the landowners, engaged with them. We will then bring all that information back to you, and you can then decide whether a plan change is appropriate or not.
Right.
So we will, I can imagine some of the issues we will get from landowners will be, no, we don't want a plan change. We may even get, no, we do not want you on our property, and that will all come back to you before we go down through the statutory process.
And we're really doing this in the first place is because the IHP felt there wasn't, I mean, the key point, isn't it, is number 17, there was not sufficient evidential basis. Is that kind of the key driver? Is that
That's one driver. We have a statutory responsibility under Section 6 of the RMA to address these sorts of issues, just like we do with built heritage. With built heritage, we've got 2,375 sites. With sites of value, sites of significance to mana whenua, we've got 75. There is an imbalance there. All those I shouldn't say all, the majority of those 2,000 sites from a built heritage perspective have an evidential basis.
right?
we're going to follow the same process for sites of significance to mana whenua.
Mr Chair, I think the other important point is that this piece of work was endorsed through the long-term plan. So this project kicked off before the panel reached any conclusions about sites of value or sites of significance. So while that's one driver, it's probably not the first or main driver.
Thank you. I have a mover in the motion from Independent Māori Statutory Board Member Leanne Namani. Do I have a second?
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Hulse, thank you. It's seconded by Councillor Hulse.
Good opinion.
It's there for discussion. Councillor Cashmore. Oh, sorry, and I
Apologies.
should refer to Councillor Cashmore's submitted
Mostly been-
questions. Some of which have been
yeah,
answered.
mostly been answered. So this flared up last time because these sites appeared on maps out of nowhere, and a lot of people got very upset very quickly, in some cases with some reason, in other cases with not reason. So the big important change this time is that the landowners, the property owners have been notified and have a chance to have input, and that's critical. My question, as you've alluded to it, Noel, is what are we going to have to resolve disputes? Because some people may not be very reasonable.
We will bring that back to the committee. I think the success of other programs we've run is that landowners have been engaged.
Yeah, that's the key part.
That's the key part. My personal view is that the first plan change should predominantly be ones where the landowner and mana whenua are in agreement to set
Yes.
a basis to go forward. I'm not saying that some are not going to be difficult going forward, but I'd like some runs on the board.
So I appreciate that, Noel. It's a very good pragmatic approach. The other point, of course, is you're starting well back from the start line because of the work that went on earlier. However, I think the comms out there is going to be critical, and
Yep.
the interface between iwi, private landowner with the council in the middle is also going to be critical, having the right people doing that sort of work.
Yes.
I think a lot of us out there are trying to spread the message of being reasonable. There's a lot of good work already been done voluntarily by property owners, but there also is some fear around there that's not necessarily reasonable. So we just need to get it in a better space.
I think that's one of
really
the
what I was
reasons that Councillor Simpson raised the issue, but I'm reluctant to put that out in the public just yet until we've talked to landowners.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
but I'd seek guidance on that.
Well,
Yes, particularly
kind of,
I don't think.
landowners.
Thank you, Noel.
Mr Chair, can I just
Can I
suggest,
go to Member Namani, the mover,
oh,
and
it was
then
just
I'll come
on.
to you?
I was actually just,
It's back to Councillor Hulse.
oh, kia ora, Leanne. I was just going to say, this is in the public now, in the public domain, and I think a statement about this from perhaps yourself as the chair of the committee, simply putting the very clear explanation out. You know, as soon as it's Māori land, or, you know, Māori cultural values, everyone has conniptions. We do this for buildings and sheds and barns and trees all the time, and everyone goes, oh, how jolly good, this is fantastic. These are items of deep importance to our community, and as soon as it's Māori, completely different reaction. So I think a good, moderate and sensible, clear explanation from you as chair would be very good. And can I venture to suggest that perhaps the petrol that was thrown on flames before by elected members may not be thrown again?
Yes,
Fair enough.
Quite agree.
Agree with that. We're fierce defenders of our built heritage and natural heritage, and I think we also need to be fierce defenders of our cultural heritage. Member Namani.
Kia ora. Councillor Hulse probably kind of echoed a comment that I would have liked to make too, and that is, you know, the cultural heritage, Māori cultural heritage of Tāmaki Makaurau forms a rich fabric for all Aucklanders, whether they be Māori, Pākehā or mana whenua Pacific Island. It's our identity, and certainly it's an aspect of heritage that has been the poor relation to colonial built heritage, and I acknowledge both this council and the previous councils in the long-term plan and in their commitments to doing something about it, to actually put that stake in the ground that the Māori cultural heritage of Auckland is just as important, if not more, in my view, than the built heritage of the city. And too much of it's been lost over time far too much. And what remnants are left, we need to do all we can to protect it. The treaty says we should. The Resource Management Act says we should. And decisions that have been made in the past by this council says we should. So I'm happy to move this. I do note that, I do hope that the fear-mongering of the past has gone, because in my view, that's what it was. Ideally, from the IMSB, we would have ideally liked to have what was in the unitary plan, proposed unitary plan originally, and that was both schedules, sites of significance and sites of value, because of course archaeological sites, when you put the features together, often form a multicultural heritage site. But I suppose history preceded us in that, and fear-mongering got in place, and fear owners, etc. So we're here where we are, and we're talking about potentially 270. But of course, right now we're talking about going out and engaging with mana whenua and landowners. So I think we put paid to the past in terms of those, the negative aspects of that, and perhaps start to look at this cultural heritage as just as important. I think going forward also, I do make note, of course, because it was the IMSB that appealed the High Court in relation to the sites of value. That was dismissed, and those that were present at the joint IMSB Council meeting yesterday were informed by our chair kind of where we're at in relation to that. It didn't say that there wasn't a error in law, there was, it just didn't meet the threshold. And the time ticking in relation to that appeal, which is separate to this matter, hasn't ended yet. So that sits there. So yes, positive, good work, staff, and I understand mana whenua have been involved quite intensively. They need to, and just look forward to the next report and moving this into the unitary plan so that these important sites can start to get the protection that they deserve.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Leanne. Kia ora. Any other comments on this matter?
No, sorry,
paper.
can I ask one more question? So
Councillor Simpson.
we don't know exactly what it means to a landowner yet, do we? Private landowner.
It is actually no different to if we identified a potential site of built heritage,
Yeah.
we'd be going through very similar process, if not probably the same process to build the evidence to move to the next stage. It is no different.
Yeah, I'm going to abstain. I'm just putting it on the table. I'm not sure.
And if I can just point out that this is to improve engagement. So by supporting this motion A, you are supporting the necessary engagement, not just with mana whenua, but those that might be affected who are landowners, and I think that's critical. John, do you want to just re-emphasise, I think, or Noel, that the step that we're taking, we're not jumping to, this is the draft plan change, where we're front-footing it by engaging with mana whenua and landowners. I think you might need to just re-emphasise that the importance of that step.
I'll kick off then. It's about having that conversation between the landowner, council and mana whenua that there is a site that mana whenua believe to be significant on that property or a neighbouring property with an extent or an influence that goes beyond it, and really just starting the conversation about, well, what might that mean? So it's not going in there with any predetermination that it will restrict your ability to do this, that or the other. It's a conversation around, well, if it's about access for mana whenua to that site at certain times of the year, how could that be arranged? Or it could be at the other end of restricting what the property owner might do. So it's really just that early engagement to have that conversation. The schedule itself that sits in the unitary plan does have 3 or 4 rules around what you can and can't do without a consent. New buildings on these sites, currently the 75 sites in the plan, any new building that affects those sites does require a resource consent. And earthworks on those sites would generally require resource consent. There are some exceptions to the 75. So even the 75 that we have, they have a tailored approach depending on what type of site it is. So it's just that early discussion. Then we start drafting up what the rules might look like if the site needs some rules in the unitary plan, and then we bring that back to committee with some feedback from the landowners and mana whenua. So
Thanks, Joe.
I don't know if that's captured it properly, but well,
I'll put it to the vote. It's moved and seconded, and moved by Member Namani, seconded by Councillor Hulse. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
I'll abstain, thank you, Mr Chairman.
And we have 1 abstention. Do you wish it to be recorded? And we will record 1 abstention. Thank you, members. Thank you, Noel, Vrinda and John. And we will now go to